Your hosts are Jared and Jason, and you have arrived at the after party. The crown winner of our last tap was Anon123 and Western Regenerate. Both of you financially gifting $25. Congratulations and thank you so very much. In second place goes to No White Guilt Clips, a crowd favorite, financially gifting $5. Thank you, brother. Congratulations to you as well. Folks, as you know, you can financially gift on Entropy and Cash App. The URLs for both are in the description below. And of course, Jared and I evenly share the financial gifts with our guests here on the after party. Now, today we are with the one and only of Radio Albion, Sven Longshanks. Sven, please introduce yourself to our esteemed community. Tell them where they can find you. And then Mr. George will take us into this wonderful conversation.
Hi, Jason. Thank you very much for inviting me on. Hi, Jared. Yeah, I'm Sven Longshanks. I'm the producer at radioalbion.com, which is a nationalist radio station. It doesn't just produce live streams. We like to produce presentations, historical presentations, looking at race throughout history, civilization throughout history. We have some Christian themed programs on there as well, and I've been doing that for about 8 years. It's fairly successful. It's always been on our own platform as well, rather than on YouTube or anything else. And that's why you've heard of me, and I really enjoy doing it. So yeah, ask away, whatever you want to ask.
Well, first of all, how long are your shanks?
Not that long. I actually got the name because I was asked to think of a surname. I used to just call myself Sven, and I got asked to think of a surname for myself to use when I was publishing at a website. And the person that asked me said, well, why don't you think of just one of the kings of England? And the only king that I could actually think of was Edward Longshanks, and I remembered that surname, Longshanks, so I put that with it. And then I found out afterwards that he was a really fantastic king. I mean, he was a great nationalist king. He tried to unite the country together. He fought against the Scots. He put down a rebellion of the Welsh, and actually since then the King of England has also ruled over Wales. He also banned usury. And a certain group that were involved in usury decided that rather than stay there, that they would rather actually leave the country. And he gets a lot of flack for that, basically. But yeah, I didn't actually pick the name because of that. It was just because it was the only king's surname I can think of, and I doubt whether you could even think of a king's surname.
A king's surname? No, not quite. I mean, more of like a nickname, like Lionheart, things like that, but maybe not surname. That's British for long legs, right? For our American audience, yes. Yeah. I thought maybe you were a tall drink of water.
No, yeah. I mean, sometimes people would call me Lamb Shanks, but yeah, I think maybe he was actually given that name because he was really tall. And he was huge, and he fell off a solar, off a castle at one time and survived it. He survived a spear being shoved through him in the Crusades. He survived being poisoned. And I think it was really, really high up when he fell from this solar, from this castle. It was amazing that he survived it. He was just an absolutely incredible king. And he was, massive in height, probably about 7 foot tall. And everybody else, you think of the time, probably nutritionally challenged, wouldn't have actually been that big. He was a giant among men.
He would have been a giant, right? Right. Wow.
Definitely.
Well, for some actual history, our listeners may know, we always like to hear some origin stories, especially when someone's on tap for the first time. So to whatever degree you'd like, Sven, if you could tell us maybe what your upbringing was like a little bit, or formative experiences, I should say. I'll leave it general. Formative experiences that led you to do what you do. And we're always keen to hear, if your particular story was one of like, say, a gradual awakening, or if there was maybe, a defining incident where it was kind of like everything fell into place for you.
Before Sven goes, I just want to quickly say that this guy is a great guy. He's hard at work all the time. I met him over there at the UK. He's a friendly guy. He's an honest guy. He's friendly with everyone. And he's hard at work every week, running Radio Albion. He's in the background making sure PWR is functioning properly. He always gets to me and lets me know whether my mic is malfunctioning or sounding right or clipping or anything like that. Very helpful guy. One of the true blue heroes that we have in the white sympathetic, white positive sphere that are largely unsung. And so we're very happy to have him here today with us on tap, and hope to have him back many more times. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew exactly who Sven Longshanks of Radio Albion was, so they can properly understand. Not some obscure person wafting in from the mists that'll be here one day and gone the next, but one of the best that's hard at work all the time. And just so folks understand what's going on with my attire, it is because today is Kentucky Derby Day in the United States. So that folks can end their confusion. But I will pass it on to you, Mr. Longshanks, so that you can answer Mr. George's question.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I do a lot of work for other people, as you pointed out there. I do the sound for PWR, restream that, write the articles for PWR. I also do the sound editing for Dr. Matthew Raphael Johnson, and I manage his Orthodox Nationalist website. I do all the audio production work at Radio Albion for various hosts. We've got 5 hosts, I think, at the moment. But yeah, I mean, as I say, it started 8 years ago, but I wasn't always a nationalist. I was a bit of a wayward youth. I got into various different music scenes, and I was a bit of a hedonist. Didn't really know where I'd sort of gone wrong. I had no idea I had really sort of gone down the wrong path. As I say, I used to be pretty silly, and then something happened where I realised that the people that I thought were my friends really, they really couldn't be relied upon. And I was looking around on the internet at the time, and I sort of fell into the conspiracy theories, and the conspiracy theories seemed to be explaining to me what I was seeing happen in the world around me. And I moved from the conspiracy theories into World War II revisionism, and then into nationalism, the racial side of things. And I had time on my hands basically as well, and I wanted to do something to help. And Andrew Anglin had a website up, Total Fascism I think it was called, and that was very popular, and he decided he was going to do the Daily Stormer. And I thought, well, I'd like to help out with this, so he had me managing the spirituality section, and I started doing interviews with him and doing podcasts with him, and that started out as Radio Stormer, and that got really, really popular. But we had creative differences. Andrew is a bit of a provocateur, and I was really wanting to concentrate on the positive creative stuff, the spiritual side of things. I also wanted to get more into history, and he was more wanting to sort of give biting satire of the current news. So we had sort of creative differences, and I left from there. And then I was doing, the website was then called Radio Aryan. We had a separate website, but Andrew continued to promote our stuff as well. He continued to promote Radio Aryan. And then again, we had these creative differences, and we left there completely. And then we were thinking, well, Dr. Matthew Raphael Johnson really wasn't too happy with the name Radio Aryan. And the reason why I wanted to use that name is because I really wanted to try and rehabilitate it. It means noble, honourable. It was used to describe Indo-Europeans right up until the sad effects of the Second World War. But up until then, it was a positive word. And the reason why I like using it is because I don't think white people have only just lived in Europe. I think we've lived all over the world. And if you say Europeans, but you're talking about something that was happening in 500 BC in India or in Assyria, you can't really say Europeans. So that was the reason for using the word. And also it made people aware that if they went on that website, they might see some nationalist content, basically. But it really rather limited us, to be honest. And maybe it meant that some people that we could have been reaching out to that may have been interested in our content, maybe they wouldn't have actually clicked on the website. So we then changed it to Radio Albion, which Dr. Johnson was very pleased about. And this was after Patriotic Alternative had just formed, because I'd known Mark for some time. I'd met him at a few meetings, And I was talking to him, and I was saying, well, we should put resources together, and we should be doing things in the real world, basically. So I helped him to put on the first conference, and PA was announced. And it was about a month after that we changed to Radio Albion, and then Mark was restreaming Patriotic Weekly Review on there. And as we came along from there, I've had various hosts join me. I said Dr. Matthew Raphael Johnson, he was very popular. Beforehand, he used to stream on the Voice of Reason network with his Orthodox Nationalist series. He's a political philosopher, a professor of religion. I mean, a really, really intelligent guy. And he produces a lecture every week, mainly concentrating on Russian history, Orthodox history. And I've been producing his podcast for him for probably about 5 years now. And I also host his previous archive. And he comes on and does a co-hosting show with me on Thursdays. We do just general news show, general news topics. I've also got a guy called Grandpa Dan, and he joined up with me in the Daily Stormer days. He was somebody that used to come into the chat room who just said, yeah, I could do this. When are you going to let me have a go at it? And I said, well, go on then, you record yourself a show. And he was brilliant, really, really funny, really, really good guy. And his show's got more of a sort of evangelical Christian flavour to it. And then I've got a guy from Britain called Max Musson, who's been involved in nationalism for 3 or 4 decades. And we do a show where we look mainly at the British news. I have a music show that I do on Thursdays, the Audio Insurgency, which is mainly about promoting nationalist music, but also we play any music that is unmistakably European in origin, whether it's in the iconography, in the style of music, or the lyrics. And then finally there's Patriotic History, which I do on Fridays, where I'm looking back through the civilizations of the world and the connections that they have to white people. Because all over this period, which is about 10 years, I spent a long time researching everything that I could about sort of hidden history, about how race connects with it, sides to religion that I wasn't aware of before, esotericism, all these things, because I really used to be into Gnosticism and esotericism, basically, and I fell for the sort of scams that certain secret societies put out there, basically, and now I like to try and debunk that. And my favourite show is the historical show, and at the moment we're looking at British history, pre-Roman British history, based on Welsh records, which are suppressed records, and it's not something a lot of people know about. But yeah, I guess that's all of it summarised.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in the dispersion of our peoples around the world, beyond Europe, as you were saying, and some of the terminology, because Jason's so big on terminology and how it's been taken away from us. Maybe that's not the best way to say it, because that's I'm very much about agency and, not giving all your power away, but given the, the debate you had with not the debate, but the concerns Dr. Johnson expressed about the original name Radio Aryan, as someone who, and again, just speaking for myself, I kind of sometimes feel like I can toggle 2 worlds, kind of like you. I came from different scenes. I have a very artistic background. I'm from a big city. So I still know some of the terrain and the language and the way these people think. Doesn't mean that every single one of them is blanket anti-white. Obviously, that is what is incentivized these days. And a lot of people just kind of aren't even aware or go along with it. That's not to take the responsibility away from them. It's not a right or moral thing to go along with something that's wrong just because it's popular. But having said all that, there's an awareness of how things are perceived and the field that's been set, and one has to know how to navigate that and play that chessboard, whether you like it or not. At the same time, it's a delicate balance because, as you said, I find myself focusing a lot on Europe, and there's a kind of a mythos, especially being in the States, of the kind of looking at Europe as the cradle and where we come from, which may be true to a large extent, but there's still a lot we don't know. And as you said, we're an exploratory people, a far-flung people, and we went all over the world, which is a wonderful trait of ours, but ironically, it also sometimes makes us harder to define or more open to certain attacks, and that's why we need to clarify these things. So I just think that in general that's an interesting topic, and I'd love to hear either of you on that, especially, again, I know Jason's very keen on the precision of language and how it shapes thoughts and emotions. So, but of course, Sven, you're our guest, so anything you'd like to reply to there first? I know I'm not asking a very specific question, but more just kind of throwing this blanket theme to explore that territory a little more.
Well, I come from a musical background as well. And I used to be quite liberal-minded. I wouldn't be going along sort of quite so much as things are today, but I was tolerant of these sorts of things because of the people that I was hanging around with, like music festivals and things like that. And it does give me a bit of an understanding that I think most people don't realise the end result of what they're supporting. I think most people are generally good people, and they're trying to do the right thing, but they've been misled by the media, by the mainstream narrative, by the government. And if you're capable of explaining these things to them, you can point out to them what the end result of the things that they are supporting is, and then they realise. Because I think if somebody can be quite a hedonist like I was, and then become to how I am today just through finding out this information, then anybody really can. And also that gives you an idea of why it's so important for our opponents to silence it and to censor it, because they know that this information really does set you free. The truth really does set you free. So they want to silence it. And I think also, if we can show what's happened in the past is just being repeated again today, that also helps with things. Like, for instance, there's one civilization called the Indus River civilization, and they don't know how it got destroyed. I think it was about 2000 BC. It was a white civilization, and then suddenly all the statues of these people, these white people, are all smashed up. And from what they can work out, there was another group there as well that wasn't entitled to healthcare and things like that. And it just seems very reminiscent of what is happening today. You've got groups smashing up statues of the people that built the civilization, and back then it ended up in the complete collapse of it all. And it just reminds me of what's going on today with the people that are smashing the statues. And again, we see the same thing happening with ISIS out in the Middle East. They're smashing down the statues of the people that built Palmyra. And there's always going to be this conflict there if you have different groups living within one territory. And that story has been told again and again and again throughout history. There's records of us thinking that it was a wonderful thing to bring in these other people groups that weren't quite up to the same standards of civilization as us, bringing them into our civilization and intermarrying with them, and thinking that this was great and everything was going to turn out just fine. And we even wrote hymns about it, singing the praises of doing this. And then within a few centuries, that civilization has completely collapsed. So you see
that's the Indus River.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Indus River Valley civilization. Yeah.
And what era? What time period?
I think it was about 2,500 BC, maybe even 3,000 BC. It was a very early one that was contemporaneous with Mesopotamia. I think they were the first ones to have circular wells, and there are the images from it, the statues from it. They're one of them is the main image from Pakistan. It's in that area that is now Pakistan, Afghanistan, and it just got destroyed basically, and they really don't know what it was. But before it got destroyed, all the statues were smashed, and that's why this famous statue that is like the mascot of Pakistan, that's why it's damaged, because they're all smashed to pieces. But yeah, so these things do get repeated, and I think there's nothing new under the sun. So it's good to talk about these things. And regarding the using specific language, yeah, that's something that I do find very admirable about Jason, his use of language and the way he tries to pin down things. I particularly like white positive. I think that's I think that's a great phrase to use. I used to say we were a pro-white radio station, but white positive sounds more in tune with today's currents, I think. I don't know if you've got any comments on that, Jason.
Yeah, well, certainly the concept pro-white has been taken up by the anti-whites and added to their anti-white narrative, and they've saddled it with a bunch of other meanings that people who typically, usually, historically considered themselves pro-white didn't actually think any of those things or want any of those outcomes. And so when we talk to our brothers and sisters now, and this is something you said really struck me, and I'll pass it back so we can keep the conversation going about you, brother. And that is that our people, our brothers and sisters, they want to do, just innately, intrinsically, they want to do what they know to be or told to be is the right thing, is the moral thing. And the vast majority of people are just led around by their noses. That's the way it is, and that's the way it has to be for there to even be a civilization, for there to be even be a group. In fact, we have far too much innate individualism, and it's something that it will never go away. So those people who absolutely love the radical individualism, you don't have to worry about it going. It's no more going to go away than your appendix on its own. It is, or your kidneys, is not going to go anywhere. It's part of who we are as a people. But when we are in an environment where the other groups of man naturally, intrinsically work together as a people, we need to then learn how to be as intelligent in that environment, or we'll just cease to be. That's just all there is to it. It's suicide. Individualism is suicide in a world of collectives. Another one of our MCs, meme curatives that we share, concepts that we share. So yeah, white positive also means a focus that is very different, which is a focus on us rather than a focus on everybody else. And so that's a big significant difference as well. But this aspect of wanting to feel moral and wanting to do the right thing and to be virtuous, this is something that we innately want to do, but then we're told what is virtuous. And as a consequence, there are a lot of, and this is where Jared Taylor and I over the years have had many disagreements. He believes that everybody, with maybe the exception of a few, are just trying to do something, just trying to do the moral thing, just trying to do the right thing. And so far beyond the statement that Sven just made. And I think that Sven is closer to the mark here than Jared Taylor, because the majority of our people, they're not politically engaged, although they are becoming increasingly so because our civilization's burning down around us. They're just trying to live their life. They're just trying to get by, some of them by the skin of their teeth. And they're told from cradle to grave that anti-white morality is morality. And when you point out to them that they are destroying their own civilization with that morality, it's a very jarring moment for them. So there are these phrases that have been coined, which we repudiate, like virtue signaling, and we call it villainy signaling. It's a virtue in the anti-white narrative to want to say bring in everybody from Central and South America, which they're getting ready to do here in the United States, just getting rid of the border altogether, it would seem, and just bring in everybody because they might be hungry, because there might be a child there, because there might, whatever it is, and they're non-white, and so they have suffered, or they suffer, or they have dangerous civilizations because the white race has caused that to be the case. And therefore, the people, the white people who are, even though you can't practice collective punishment, when it comes to other races, you can when it comes to the white race. So these white people, they just capitulate. They just say, well, that must be the moral thing to do because we were so evil. They don't know until we reach them that there is an anti-white narrative that is designed to make them lower their guard so that we can be white erased from the civilizations that we build. And that's really the mission that we have here. So it's something that I know I certainly have to keep reminding myself that there are very good, and with this, I'll pass it over to Sven and get his thoughts on it, and Jared. There are very good brothers and sisters, white vagues out there, white people out there who believe that they're doing the right thing by being for something that we can clearly see as anti-white. And we have to handle them differently than we handle these frothing, sick, maniacal anti-whites that you can see the difference. You know, they openly relish and celebrate the victimization of our people, the white erasure of our religions, the tearing down of our statues Sven was talking about. So we definitely have to have two different approaches. And mainly, I'll just sum up with, when it comes to the really frothing, maniacal kind, you just move on. Once you find out that they're crazy, you just move on, unless you have an opportunity to educate an audience by using these anti-whites as your foil. But what are your thoughts, Sven?
Yeah, a couple of points to pick up on there. You know, I mean, if you want to be a good person, then you need to be good for your own people. You can't be good for all peoples, because then you're neglecting your own people. And I think one of the issues here is we look at these other groups that are within multicultural societies, and what they're doing is actually good for their group, but it might not be good for our group. So you end up with this conflict of interest there, and our group ends up thinking that the best thing to do is what's best for these other groups. And it's the equivalent of, say you've got a man that provides for his wife and his family. Instead of providing for his wife and his family, he's providing for the wife and the family up the road. And he's saying, well, we've got to look after everyone. We've got to look after everyone. Well, if you're doing that, who's going to be looking after your family if you're looking out for these other groups? And also the way that we do things, all the different people groups have different ways of doing things. They have different strategies, and we may look at a strategy that one of these other groups is using, and we may think, well, this is terrible, it's having an awful effect on us. But if you look at the effect that it's having on them, it's not having a bad effect on them. It's increased their power, it's increased their influence, it's increased their wealth. So it's the right thing for that people group to do. So you can't criticize it in that aspect. What you can criticize is our response to it. Why do we have a multicultural society? Why have we allowed different groups with opposing interests to live within one territory? It's just going to generate conflict. I mean, I think the way it's supposed to work is if you have each people group has its own territory, effectively a country, and the countries then compete to try and progress. And I think that would work. But when you have one territory, one country with different people groups within it, and they're all vying for power and influence, and there's just this constant conflict of interest, and we end up tying our hands behind our back by making these hate speech laws and saying, well, you can only talk about these things in a certain way. And, you know, to me, effectively, it's almost as if our ancestors were arrogant and thought that they would always be on top of everything, and it didn't matter what happened, they would still be on top. And they said, well, we'll even make these speech laws, and we'll tie both hands behind our backs, and we'll still be able to be on top. And I think that's partly the way we've got to look at it. You know, we can win. And I think the way to win is to look at what our strengths are. And our strengths are what you pointed out, Jason. It's that we are a moral people. And what we're really good at doing is finding equitable solutions that benefit everybody. And if you look at, like, say, the third world, you say to them, who would you most rather have as a judge in a court? And they'll say, you know, somebody British is what they used to say. Or they'll always say a white man, because the white man will put other people's needs either above his own, or he will look at things equally and be just. And that's the way that we need to be looking at things. I think we need to be looking for equitable solutions which don't paint our opponents as being the bad guys, but say, look, they're just trying to do what's best for them, we're just trying to do what's best for us. But the situation that we are in means that creates a conflict of interest between us. And I think one of the problems with nationalism is hypocrisy, because we look at these other groups when they're succeeding and we say, well, this is terrible because it's so bad for us, but it's good for the other group. You know, they are actually doing the right thing for their group. They are conforming to the nationalist ideal of doing what is best for your extended family. And the issue is with us. So as you were saying, white positive, concentrating exactly on us. Well, we are where the fault lies, and that's where the conversation needs to be directed on things that we can do to rectify that fault, basically. And this is all sort of conclusions that I've come to over the last few years, and it's quite an issue, I think, this hypocrisy, and trying to look at things objectively and not just subjectively. You know, it's like okay, we've got problems with mass immigration, but is it the people who are coming here? Is it their fault? No, it's not. It's our fault. We invited them here. You can't then blame them for coming here and for then trying to increase the influence and power that they have, because that's just naturally what they should be doing. The issue is with our representatives who have sold out their responsibility to us in inviting these other peoples here because they think it's going to boost the economy or whatever reasons they have. And I think most people do believe these reasons. I'm rather like Jared Taylor. I don't think there are that many people with malicious intentions. Particularly one group gets ascribed with having these malicious intentions, but I think they're just being themselves. If you look at their material that they write about themselves, they don't understand why everybody is so against them, because they're just being themselves. They're just doing what comes naturally to them, and they're just looking out for their people. So, sometimes I've upset people a bit by saying that, and I get accused of, supporting our opponents or whatever, but I'm just trying to look at things objectively. And the fault does lie with us, and the way to fix it is to just try and improve yourself for a start. It's no good looking at people way up there in government and saying, yeah, we're going to take the government over one day. You can't do that now, but what you can do now is you can improve your own life and improve the lives of the white people around you, and you can set a good example. You can educate yourself, you can help to educate others, you can help to encourage others when they're trying to improve themselves, and basically get a community doing things like that, which is what I think is so great about the patriotic alternative community, because it's not concentrated on, we're going to go and take power. It's concentrated on having a community of like-minded people that are all interested in improving themselves and improving the situation for the white people around them. And when you talk about that, you talk about, we want to improve the situation for white people. It doesn't mean you're excluding improving the situation for other people. You're always going to be best off when you are around your own people, around your own extended family. And as far as I can see it, advocating for less immigration, advocating for ethnic homogeneity, and you would think that some of these other groups would say, yes, that's the right way to be. If you look at black advocates, they will say, because there aren't enough black teachers in the schools, we can't empathise with the teachers. Because there isn't a black people doing the job interview, I don't think I've been given the job. Because it's not a black judge, this black guy has been sent to prison. Well, if they were surrounded by their own people, then that wouldn't be able to happen, would it? You wouldn't be able to get this discrimination. You wouldn't be measuring yourself up against people, representatives of other people groups. You'd only be measuring yourself up against your own people group, and that way you would get that boost of knowing that you've done the right thing and you've achieved something through meritocracy that people need. I mean, nationalism it just seems to me it's the right way to be. And it doesn't mean that you're excluding everybody else from having nationalism. It means everybody else should have the same. Everybody should want to live in ethnically homogenous communities. And when you point out the benefits of that, and there are many, many benefits, even from the hormones that you produce when you're around your own people, when you produce oxytocin, which is the hormone that's produced between mother and child when the child is suckling. It's a social bonding hormone. You produce that when you're around your own people. It makes you want to be a part of community, makes you want to be charitable and help people out. When it's multicultural, you don't have that, and you have people that don't understand your body language, don't understand your language. I mean, on top of that, you've just got so many potential victims for crime in a multicultural community, and that's if every people group had exactly the same crime level. If you then had a multicultural area, there would be more crime there, because it's easier to carry out a crime against somebody that's not a part of your family. If it's a part of your family, it's going to be difficult, the same as it's going to be difficult to self-harm. But if it's from another family, and you've got criminal types in amongst your group, they're going to carry out those crimes against a member of another family, not their own. So I think multiculturalism just increases the potential victims for crime. It prevents people feeling charitable and sociable, right down to right down to the hormones that we produce. It's just completely negative, and that's negative for every people group, not just for whites, but negative for every people group. So we talk about a lot of stuff like this at Radio Albion as well, and I get a lot of the way from looking at the way these different people groups interact from Professor Edward Dutton. He's been very helpful reading his books and listening to his streams over the last couple of years. He's given me a lot of ideas, and also Professor Kevin MacDonald as well with his book. That helped me to understand the way that these other people groups were just trying to do what's best for them, basically, and doing it in ways that are completely different to the way that we would. You know, I think the way for us to do what's best for us is to try and find equitable solutions that suit everyone. If we were to copy these other people groups and try and strategize in the way that they are, we wouldn't be true to ourselves, and we'd fail at what we are doing. And I think that, you know, that is part of the problem. We try to copy these other groups. We say, well, they're doing this, but we fail then.
Right.
Now, I'll pass it over to you, Jared.
I want to ask you about this, though. There's such a conundrum here, because part of us being ourselves is we do project and empathize onto others and are less ethnocentric in general. I mean, again, always in the background, I have this interest in what you said at the beginning of the show about even thinking of us beyond just Europe and the implications that opens up. But at the same time, it's sometimes easier to have these conversations with a bit more focus. So being that you're British, I'd particularly like to hear about the British iteration of this. And obviously you do a lot of work in these circles. I don't know to what degree, obviously we all do to some degree or another, through friends, family, other pursuits, just being in the world. I don't know how much mainstream media you take in just as kind of a study on, what the public is being fed. But the particularly British sense of us, it seems, what we hear a lot here, and I don't see us as that different, really. Jason and I both, I think, have a very strong feeling for England and Britain in general. Yeah. But we still have our different stories and different trajectories. If I moved over to England, I wouldn't be seen as English. I know that. So their boundaries mean something, which goes along with everything you're saying. When it comes to other people's, it just extends even more so. What we hear when we hear you speak about yourselves, especially, is that after the British Empire kind of waned, that there was a decreasing sense of an usness in the British Isles, and England in particular, and that coupled with, I don't know, I'm sure there was much more of a sense of pride, and the time of the British Empire, the sun never sets on that flag, and there's a we there. But still, I know the Brits, and particularly amongst white peoples, are tend even more so relative to our peoples as being individualistic, as not wanting to call too much attention to themselves. Sometimes, there's certain. I'm speaking in very general terms, of course, but how this kind of goes against this sense of multiculturalism being inevitable at this point. I know that there was some kerfluffle this week where, someone who is coming from a bit of a different sphere, but is a pretty respectable guy, had some critiques of Patriotic Alternative, even though it sounds like he doesn't know about them too much. And it sounds like he would be on board with a lot, but he basically just thinks that it's not in the English character, especially with what's gone on and how many people from other cultures are already present in England, to just, for the vast majority of the public to get on board with something like, mass immigration reforms. And even if it's over time and done in the most fair, nonviolent way possible, incentivizing people to leave and go back to their home countries, that there isn't going to be public support. But I'm interested, you being English and on the ground there, if you see attitudes changing, or you interact with people outside of these circles, if you see them becoming more open to this and starting to kind of shake off the anti-white programming and be able to see the world from their eyes, at least for a moment, and not always have it be about this, well, how are we affecting these other people, and are we being fair to these other people who are? Funny enough, part of it is your story. Just like we get our own guilt trips here in the States, part of it is the backwash of empire is exactly what I just said. At one point it was this point of pride and strength, and now it's used as this bludgeon of everyone. All the other cultures that were part of that empire now have to somehow come and live in the British Isles. So what is your take on public perception and the critiques that this is always going to be kind of a niche thing? Not so much as like a doomsayer kind of thing, because I do believe anything's possible. The future is not written. There's always surprises. There's always events and sea changes, and we can't foresee. But more just about, as our conversation has been going, I want to keep it more. I think it's more useful to couch it in terms of the agency we have, understanding ourselves. So I want to kind of focus my question a little bit in terms of being realistic about our character, and if like our own Achilles heels in this kind of thing, are people like us, I admittedly, I'm being a little, playing devil's advocate here for a minute, but are people like us who get on these shows, or people who listen to these shows, are we outliers in terms of white people? Are we like more ethnocentric than the average white person and kind of swimming against the tide?
Well, I think we're just more open about it. We're just more aware of it. I think all white people like to be amongst white people. I mean, all the rural areas in Britain are filled with white people, but they certainly wouldn't see themselves as white nationalists, and they probably never questioned the fact that they like to be amongst people the same as themselves. And maybe that's why there's such a low crime rate in the country, is because it's all people that are the same as themselves. And I think there is a great thirst for learning about the empire and learning about it from our point of view, because we're being taught about it now from people that were either ruled by the British Empire or weren't a part of it, or the descendants of people that weren't a part of it, people that have moved to Britain in the last 50 years, or their families have moved to Britain in the last 50 years, that because we've now said to them, well, you are British, you are the same as us, they think that it's their history as well. But it can't be. History is his story. It's one group's story, and to then go back and change it means that you're falsifying history. Because when you're looking at history, you want to be looking at primary source documents. Whatever is closest to the time is going to be the most accurate. And what's most closest to the time, with things such as these statues and the people that they're now telling us were terrible people, is all these writings saying what wonderful people they are, how all the money they made they used for philanthropy, how they built universities, how they built hospitals, how these were absolutely wonderful people, and we had to build a statue for them. And that's what the primary source documents say. And then we come 250 years into the future, and you've got somebody else whose family moved into the country within the last 50 years, who is saying, well, no, this has to go. This is terrible, because this person here was terrible to my people, and now I'm a British citizen, so that means that was British people he was being terrible to, and it all gets confusing. It's because we've confused people as to what ethnicity means and what to be a citizen means. So many people get confused, and because they're a citizen of Britain, they think that that must mean that maybe their ethnicity is British. I mean, we've even had David Lammy, this black MP, questioning why he can't say his ethnicity is black British.
I've seen that,
he's a citizen. Yeah, it's his ethnicity is ancestry. That's what's important. And I think people do want to see white people speaking up for whites. I mean, even if they're not going to be supportive of reversing immigration, I think they would be supportive of a group that speaks up for our rights, because every time there's a push to take down statues or whatever, it's all one-sided. We very rarely ever hear from somebody that says, well, hang on a minute, I'm speaking up for the indigenous British people. I'm speaking up for the people who don't want that statue to be pulled down. And whenever they do any polls, people don't want to see things changed. It's only a small group that have really sort of managed to make their way into the councils and into the universities that is affecting this. When you talk to the people that live on the street that's going to have the name of the street changed, they don't want the name of the street changed. The people in the towns where the statues are going to be pulled down, they don't want these statues to be pulled down. And often it's just one person that has just moved there, and maybe they're part of a community that isn't very well represented in that area. And they'll be the one that's complaining. And then the white people there will be, oh no, how terrible. We can't possibly be racist. We must pull this statue down. And there's just this knee-jerk reaction. But I do see that changing because, these ad hominems that get used against us, I think they're just wearing out. I mean, people hear it and they just think, oh yeah, but you call everybody that now. And this is just somebody that's speaking up for us.
Have you seen in your own life people, any interesting examples of people coming around who were afraid to talk about this and then change their perspective, or denied this and then change their perspective?
Well, I get people sort of asking me questions that know what I do and that ask me questions about it and say, yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't thought of that before. But I think it's a slow process. But I think that most of the people that I speak to, I think they're somewhere along the spectrum up to where I am, basically. Everybody can see that things are going wrong in the country, and they don't understand why the government is doing the things that it is doing. Yes, we want to help people, but why would you want to make Wales into a nation of sanctuary? Why would you want to invite people from all over the world into Wales? It doesn't make sense. The Welsh people don't want that, but their representatives do want that. And I think it's the same in England. And if you were to say to somebody that lived in a rural area, would you like to have lots of Syrian and Afghan refugees there? Then they would say no. But don't be so silly. Of course, they're not going to do that. And then before you know it, they will have done that. And they'll have struggled to say no. I mean, we had this recently, I think last year or the year before, a little village, little Welsh village, and suddenly they brought in all these refugees that have been trying to break in through the channel there, and they put them in an army barracks, and they set fire to the army barracks, and there were all these protests there, and lots of nationalists went there to help out, but of course they were like, oh no, we can't have it hijacked by the far right. But if you don't have the people there, then they're not going to pay any attention to you. You need to have the people there to get the government to pay attention to you. And the local councillor said that he didn't like it. He was going to put a stop to it, and he wasn't able to. As far as I'm aware, they've moved these groups and they've put them in housing all around the area now. So there was a pushback against it, but it didn't succeed. And I would hope that they went on from that to look this sort of stuff up online and find people like ourselves that are a bit more knowledgeable about it and the forces that are behind it all and why it's happening. I think there's more and more people that are getting dissatisfied with the agenda, basically, the promotion of all these sorts of things that we never used to tolerate, that our grandparents wouldn't have liked, and this promotion of immigration. I think most people think, well, we've got nothing against these people, but why are their interests being placed above ours? Why are the government doing that? And I know for a fact that old people are questioning why the government are doing these things. They never used to do things like that. They used to put our interests first, but now they're putting all these other groups' interests first.
Yeah.
And, within 50 years, we won't have enough of us left. I've heard some of them saying that.
Well, as much as I respect and understand their concerns, what we have to be more concerned about even is the young people, and if they are willing to look at it that way, because they are the ones who will grow up with this and have been indoctrinated by it. There's so many different ways to talk about this and ways to turn it over. I know Jason looks like you wanted to say something. I'll just briefly say, for my part, and Jason's heard me say this before, and again, speaking generally and not at all putting myself up as some kind of historical or political analyst, I just found myself, being a voice, doing these shows, which has been a wonderful, wonderful part of my life. But I'm really not, by training or dint of my temperament, someone who really, analyzes, geopolitics and history and things like that, but just kind of being someone who's more taking the temperature of things and coming from a maybe more creative, intuitive mindset. The way the world's going with ease of travel, I don't really see cultures being totally monolithic. I see there being multicultural zones, and I think it makes sense to some degree in cities, city centers. There might be, neighborhoods where there's, people who are from other areas for whatever reason. They're studying there, they're working there. There's little communities. But if there's a very, very, very clear boundary from the home country of what it means to be, let's say London remains somewhat multicultural in 50 years' time, but there were massive kind of changes that we would be happy with as well, where there's more of a healthy English culture and sense of identity. You may still have cities like London and other major cities in England, have pockets where there's other people there. But what I'm looking for is a stronger sense of boundaries, where just like when you see like a beautiful sculpture in relief, you see like a panel and they'll kind of do sculptures as frescoes and things like that. You need a base, you need a background from which to sometimes have a little variation on, and I'm not saying this is going to happen in other cultures too. There's Asian cultures that are like this, where there's many different types of people. So I'm definitely not acquiescing to the idea that only Western cultures, only white cultures should be multicultural. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense for me, knowing what I know and advocating for what I advocate for, to say something like that. But I'm trying to think of the way the world is going. And also the fact that some of us do, not the crime element, of course, but again, speaking as a creative from a city who, not here, not on this show, not with our community, but in certain wider circles, get derided a little bit. I've spoken to other people who are a little more like me, who honestly sometimes feel like they don't have a place because we're told, there's a certain, even in our circles, there are certain parameters about what you should be into, and there's a certain aesthetic about like girls running in wheat fields and farms, and I think it's great. Like the homestead movement and all that is great, and we speak to a lot of guests about that. But that's not my temperament. It's not what I'm interested in, and I know other people who aren't. And I actually kind of miss city life. I know that that's like a controversial thing to say, but I've been outside of a city for a couple of years now, and there's a lot of things about it that, frankly, I miss. It's where I come from, and it's my temperament is well suited for it. And I wouldn't have a problem with certain areas where you have the Indian restaurants and the this and the that, and as long as there was a very, very, very clear boundary from the home culture, and the people who were there knew that they were in Western civilization, and more particularly whatever country they're in, and there's a way of doing things, and we had a healthy sense of us. So I feel like I think that it's incumbent upon us to acknowledge those things as well. Again, just speaking for myself, it doesn't seem as easy to get this over on people, especially people who are going to be more working in media and communications and academia and things like that, the things of the mind, who, whether they're, when you're white, then you get a double dose of being more open-minded and empathetic and wanting to see other sides. That's the temperament of people who get into communications and arts and media, and are going, whether you like it or not, are going to be influencing things. It's, the people out in the countryside that you're talking about, wonderful part and vital part of our culture, but all the puzzle pieces fit together. From what I see, it's often going to be the people who gather in the cities and the university towns that, even if it's a smaller number of people, are going to be influencing things. And that's why, as someone who's creative, I'm very interested in doing something that is accessible and doesn't sound like it's this fringe thing that most people aren't going to be able to get into. Like, I still use genres and idioms from popular music, but just with a little bit of a twist, where there's not anti-white stuff, obviously, but there's also something more positive and uplifting, and some of it's intuitive. You can't, really put your finger on it, but you just kind of know that it's from us and our sensibilities. So that still kind of goes, that's couched in this whole idea of, I guess, getting this over to people, of communicating this to people. I'm always interested in that. And we all come from our own experiences with our own strengths and perspectives. But that's something that I know fascinates both Jason and I, and brought us together, and so many people we talk to, is how do we, clarify and articulate the mess of narratives that we got, while doing so create a sense of peoplehood and community more. And then from there, once we have some of those things that we've been working out, how to then communicate that further out, radiate that further out to people who I see all the time. I'm sorry I'm speaking long, but I'll just wrap it up here. We've talked about this again on the show as well, especially the last 2 years with COVID. I dipped my toe into other circles. Not that I'm like actively commenting in private chat rooms, but just kind of bouncing around the internet and seeing different people on social media commentary. There are a lot of people who are close to how we think. They're 1 or 2 degrees of separation away. They all see the lies in some way, and they're all concerned that we're being lied to and something's not right. And that's what unifies all of us. And I just think often, hopefully, I know people might think that it's kind of a optic, sometimes you get criticized about the optics thing, but I know that that's not where I'm coming from. It's really just, I'm really fascinated by how we correctly communicate this and win hearts and minds, and not just be seen as a niche thing it's inevitably going to be just a fringe thing, because that's what the narrative is about, what our interests are already. And I think that it's very easy for people to get into this and then just acquiesce to that. Like Jason says a lot, like, "Oh, we're the bad guy, so I'm just gonna double down and play the role of the bad guy." And we're trying to break through in our own ways and the different kind of things we do individually and together, to really have a much more holistic, robust way of understanding things, communicating, operating, and all the ways people do, talking about politics or making music or, anything you want. We know people like you, I'm sure, who are interested in yoga and organic food and green juices. And again, like sometimes people in quote unquote right-wing circles think down on that stuff, like it's lefty stuff. But there's all kinds of people who are interested in that stuff, but they also are questioning the narratives, and they're amenable to the kinds of things we're talking about. And I think we have to bring all of that to, like, not lose our core, but be flexible enough to incorporate all of those things and welcome the different personalities and intelligence types that come from these different circles, spheres of influence, subcultures. And if we can do that, then I guess, to answer the thing that I posed before, then that's how we can viably move the needle. But I spoke a lot. I'm sorry if it was a bit of a ramble, but I open the floor to either of you to take away whatever you want from that.
Sven, go for it, brother.
Yeah, well, there was 2 things there. I mean, one of them was nationalism is basically a creed, isn't it? And it should influence everything that you do. So if you're trying to improve your body, you would be doing what you say. You would be trying to eat organic food, and then you would have a way to talk to organic farmers. If you're doing music, then you might want to be writing about things that are unique to Europeans, or a way of looking at things that's European. So it's just about being white and expressing that in everything that you do, and trying to come across as a good person and being a good person. And then I think you can, your opinions on politics are going to be a particular way. Your opinions on religion, you might be looking at religion from what are the aspects of it that are beneficial to white people, and you can look at everything like it. I mean, I do think nationalism is a creed. I think that's the right word for it, and it should be protected in law. I mean, they say that veganism is a creed, because if you're a vegan, it governs what shoes you wear, it governs what you eat, the way you think about things. And I think it's the same thing with nationalism. You'll be wanting to buy clothes, or whatever you buy, you would want the money to be going back into businesses that were owned by your own people, all that sort of thing. So I think that's the way to look at things. Is it should be expressed holistically throughout everything that you do in life. Really, you should be thinking about, I'm a representative of my people. How can I best help my people in everything that I do? And also, finding out as much as you can about your people is going to help you to find out as much as you can about yourself. And the other point that I wanted to pick up on, where you were saying about cities like London will be multicultural. Well, capital cities are always going to be multicultural. I mean, even Moscow is multicultural. People will point that out and say, oh, Russia is just as bad as Europe. Look at Moscow. But it's the capital city. Of course, it's going to have a lot of different peoples there. That's not really the issue. The issue is that we need to have areas, boundaries, like you say, and we need to have areas where the culture and the people are preserved. And the people that are in the capital cities need to be encouraged to identify with their ethnicity. So they understand that they're guests in our country, and what we would like them to do is be like us and identify with their ethnicity and do what's best for the people of their ethnicity. Obviously, they're going to be happiest living in a community with the group of their own ethnicity. So I think we need to encourage people to realise all the benefits that they have of being born into the nation that they have been born among, and I mean the ethnic nation there. So people don't identify so much with citizenship, which is kind of the opposite of the people that say, oh, we need more assimilation. We need people to assimilate and then everything will be okay. If only the Muslims would behave like Christians. No, Muslims should be behaving like Muslims. They should be doing what's best for Muslims. And that goes the same for all these other groups. And we should be encouraging them to do that, and not encouraging them to feel bad about themselves, but encouraging them to do what's best for their people, and then saying, well, that's all we're asking for ourselves. We want to advocate for our people. I think this is one of the most important things that we need, is a group that advocates for white people's interests, particularly in Britain, a group that just advocates for the indigenous British people's interests, that can go there when the government are looking into policies. There should be a representative of us that's there that says how this policy is going to impact upon the indigenous British people. There are representatives of all the other groups there saying how this policy is going to be impacting on their minority group, but we don't have anybody there saying this is how it's going to impact on us. And if we're going to have multicultural societies, which we appear to have set up for ourselves, then we need to have representation within that society. And I think that needs to be the first step. I think then, as you say, we need boundaries. The cities that are multicultural, I mean, if people want to be multicultural, they can stay there, but there should be areas outside of that where people don't have to go along with that. It's almost like reservations, so they could say, well, the countryside is out of boundaries. And this is one of the problems we have, because they're now talking about decolonizing the countryside and trying to encourage minorities into the countryside, because it's areas where there aren't very many minorities. But surely, if they wanted to come to the countryside, it should be because they want to see how things are, which is uniquely British, uniquely traditionally British, not wanting to change it. And I don't think it's all of them that do want to change it. I think it's a minority that that are encouraged to do these sorts of things. Because if you were to say to somebody, what's better, to identify with your family and advocate for your family, or to disown your family and pretend that you're a part of this other family? Surely it's going to be much better to identify with your roots and really understand who you are and what you're best at and what you really empathize with, than to pretend to be a part of somebody else's group. And that's what our government is doing. It's saying, pretend to be British. Here's this bit of paper that says you're British. It's now your history. But of course, then they say, well, it can't be our history because, you haven't treated us very well here, or whatever. And you get these conflicts of interest. So I think if we encourage people to identify with their ethnicity and to do what they can to advocate for their ethnicity, nobody can argue with that. You're telling somebody black, do what's best for black people, and I'll support you to do what's best for black people, but would you support me to do what's best for white people? And I'm not talking about doing what's best for white people in a way that would harm black people either. I think we need to look at ways that are, as I say, ways that are equitable, which do not have a negative impact on these other groups. And it's not going to have a negative impact to encourage somebody to live with their extended family. That's going to be when they're going to be best off. And I think a lot of these people, I mean, they're over here because their own countries aren't as well developed as Britain is. They think we want to come to Britain. The streets are paved by gold. We're going to earn lots of money. But they come here and you know, they're let down, really. It doesn't live up to what they really want. And if we encourage them with financial encouragement to go back to their ancestral homeland and help rebuild that would be a benefit. I think one of the government's plans now is to get fake asylums. I call them fake asylum seekers because they come from France, but they're basically asylum seekers. They want to put them in Rwanda, and if they do have a genuine asylum claim, they will be able to stay in Rwanda, and they'll be given a house in Rwanda, and they'll be given help to build a business, which I think is a fantastic idea, because most of the asylums, really they're economic migrants, but most of them are African, so they're going to be best off amongst other Africans. Rwanda needs building up. It's going to need new businesses, and that's the perfect place for somebody who is an economic migrant who is black to go, is to Rwanda, and they'll get help from the British government for doing that. And that way it will help raise the living standards in Rwanda. It will help the person that's claiming asylum from whatever persecution it is, because he won't be persecuted there, and it will help the indigenous British people because it won't add to the burden in Britain. So policies like that, I think, are good policies that should be encouraged, and also just encouraging people to identify with their ethnicity, and you know, bigging people up about their ethnicity, not you know, sort of rubbishing them about the things that they've done, but trying to find positive things. And that's a final thing, is always look for things that you have in common with people, to start off from, to try and start off from some agreement there, rather than starting off, you know, in opposition. I think that's a good way of looking at it. But yeah, I'll pass it back to you.
Well said, brother. And this has been an absolutely engrossing and invigorating conversation. The hour has swept by. We're past the top of the hour, and we're in the closing minutes before we tap out, folks. So if you have any financial gifts, questions, or comments, make sure you tag and make those financial gifts now. I'm really, I want to talk about so much more. I wish I could continue, but we're definitely going to have Sven back, because there's stuff pertinent to this conversation I'd like to talk more about, and to get Sven's views on, Mr. George's views on. And also, I want to go back to Sven's beginning. I want to go back to young Sven. I want to know more about young Sven. So we're going to have to bring him back in a couple of weeks' time at least. I want to know more about these nihilist days and the unreliable friends and the conspiracy theories. Like, don't answer right now. We'll just have people wonder about Sven. Was there any interest in Hollow Earth, or any interest in aliens, or anything like this that young Sven investigated back in the day? We'll talk about that next time. A little bit of a cliffhanger there. But I'm going to be refreshing the Cash App screen and taking a look at Entropy, which I know we have at least two very wonderful financial gifts on. And over here on Entropy, we see our great brother in quills, because and oration, quills and oration, not arms, and that is Tall Kevin 87, and he's financially gifting $30 US, folks. Let's get him some. How about some of those 07s they do, the little salutes? We could do the 07, and $30 from Tall Kevin, and especially for him, because he points out something here that he did several months back. He says, Sven, have you noticed an increase in traffic after the advertisement I put on Sam Hyde's podcast? Yes, I'm tooting my own horn here, but it truly is up to us to promote our culture media. We want to see in the world. No one will do it for us. Thanks for what you do. I really enjoy listening to everyone you have on there. Great jobs. So before you answer that, I just want to point out that, and celebrate Tall Kevin here again. I mean, I think it was like $2,500 that he spent to advertise both Radio Albion and nowhiteguilt.org. So we We very much love our tall Kevin as he rains the dollars down from his colossal height, and how therefore he got the name. But it's an important statement here he makes also, in that we have to do what we can do and what works, and that means doing things, not just saying things. And I appreciate everyone deeply who comes from the white sympathetic sphere generally, and they show up here, and I want you to show up. I want you to stick around. I want you to learn about what we're doing and how it's very different. When you show up, I know it becomes habitual to go from one circle within that white sympathetic sphere to another, and then to just share your opinions. And it's one of the old jokes, especially back before the internet was robust enough to handle all of us on it. Everything was in person. Everything was IRL. And you would go to these events. You would go to conferences. You would go to meetings, and it was simultaneously a boon, because you got to talk with other people who were awake, who were alert, who knew what was going on, who cared about our people. And at the same time, it was a bit of a drag, because you would be hit with people who just had to share every one of their opinions that they had brought and packed up in dirty suitcases from circle to circle to circle. And they would say, here's what needs to be done. Here's what's going on. Here's what's, and nobody's listening. Nobody wants to know what is, if there is a new view, if there's something succeeding, and it doesn't matter how many times all of these old views and these old approaches have accomplished nothing. It doesn't matter for a lot of these folks. God bless them. I love every one of them for caring about our people, and especially in IRL days, showing up all the time in person. But it doesn't seem to, I don't know, be impressed upon them until somebody does point it out that what they're recommending can't be done. You know, it would be like, for example, saying that, well, we need to control the printing of money, and then we can, well, okay. I mean, we also need aliens to show up and then to defend us for ourselves. I mean, these sorts of wishes are ultimately childish. We have to deal with the world that we're in. And so I appreciate the passion. I love the enthusiasm. But please, when you show up here, this is a place to learn about strategies that are being scientifically tested and proven to work. Those which don't work are dumped. And so this is a place to show up and say, okay, well, what is this all about? Rather than the typical jump from circle to circle, and you get there and you just talk without a breath and until you pass out about what exactly is going on in the world and what exactly has to be done. I've heard these speeches from thousands at this point, and none of that, a lot of wishes there, but none of it's come to fruition. So, but I do want to hear from Sven on Tall Kevin's question here. Did you see, because Tall Kevin actually went out there with his own labor and industry, and he's done amazing things. Andrew Torba knows who I am and knows what white well-being is, and posted it on Gap because of Tall Kevin, something else that he had done. So this is not about saying what needs to be done. This is about doing the things that actually work. And so what did you see? We certainly saw a big increase. What about you, Sven?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. I checked back and saw a big jump with the line going straight up in the air, actually, over that week when he did that. I thought that was a brilliant initiative, just taking the initiative, not saying we should be doing this, but just going out and doing something, and not just helping myself and helping you, but also helping Sam Hyde. I mean, that was the genius of it. It was helping somebody else, and at the same time, helping both of us out with advertising at the same time as funding Sam Hyde's project. I thought that was a fantastic idea. Really, really touched by that. It was great. And yeah, hats off to Kevin for doing that. A brilliant initiative that just helped everyone out. And also the people that see that's going to be helping them out, because they're going to come to radioalbion.com, and they're also going to go to nowhiteguilt.org, and they're going to learn some new information as well as laughing at Sam Hyde. So yeah. Great idea.
Brilliant response. He also tacks on here that he asks, Sven, have you noticed any content creators who have totally flipped the script when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine conflict, especially a creator named Poseidon? Looks like some type of asset account. Now, Tall Kevin asked me the same thing about Poseidon and what's going on there, and then some info. Have you seen any creators that have suddenly changed drastically as a consequence of the war in Ukraine?
No, I mean, I don't get much chance to catch up with other content creators, really. I mean, I'm just busy all the time with production at Radio Albion. It does take me 12 hours a day from Monday to Saturday working on it. So I don't get much time to check out other content creators. But I think the Ukraine-Russia thing really has split a lot of people, because they end up thinking, well, we should be supporting this Azov battalion because they're the nationalists. Russia is calling them the nationalists, but in my opinion, they're not behaving like nationalists, because they're trying to drive out the ethnic separatists. It's the ethnic separatists that are in Donetsk and Lugansk that seem to me to be the nationalists. They want to have a separate country based upon their ethnicity, whereas the other group want to destroy that ethnicity. They want to ban them from speaking their language. They want to ban them from writing in their language, and they want them to speak in Ukrainian. And to me, that just seems the same as what the English tried to do with the Welsh. They banned the Welsh from speaking Welsh. They banned them from writing their books, and it just seems to me the same thing. So it really has split us, I think, this Russia-Ukraine thing. But that's the way that I look at it, regardless of the labels that are being put on them. It's look at the actions, not the words, I think. But yeah, I'm not really up to date on most comment creators. I've heard of Poseidon, but I couldn't tell you what his comments were on it.
Well, I really like your statement there about observe the actions rather than the words. That's actually all the way down to the very personal one-on-one relationships. Observe. People can tell you anything, but the way they behave, what they actually carry out, that's what matters. We have one more financial gift from the great Mrs. Jess Horst, which I will read in one moment, and then we will get everybody's final thoughts, and Sven will tell us where we all can find him. We have JK160 thanking me, or saying he likes the hat, and well, thank you so much for that. And everybody who said that they like the hat. It's Kentucky Derby Day, and the horses are running today all day long. Axis Mundi says, I appreciate the way No White Guilt demands we live in reality. It is a healthy mindset. Yeah, imagine that. Thank you so much for being healthy. Imagine that we say, what's actually possible, and then let's make headway in areas that it's actually possible to make headway. Thank you for that. Nancy Drew also says, No White Guilt, true. I'm always ready to learn new ideas, communication techniques. God bless you, sister. You're one of our real champions here all the time, working hard. Another unsung hero. Thank you, Nancy Drew, for all of your hard work for white well-being. And we have, folks, get out those 07s for salutes if it will allow you to do that, or 07, actually the letter 07. The 07 looks to me like a little head, or like a midget. I think it's supposed to be the head, though, and the salute's like way over the head. I don't know. But if you can't do that for whatever reason, if YouTube's having fun with us, but raucous emojis otherwise, applause and cheers and all of that sort of business for the great Mrs. Jess Horst, a true champion, a financial gift accompanied by 3 white heart emojis, one for each of us, gentlemen. She's a lovely lady, and financial gift of $50 US, 50. God bless you, Mrs. Jess Horst. We love you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Sven. Yes, indeed. Sven, your final thoughts, brother, and where folks can find you?
Well, I think what we're really saying is we have to adapt to the way that the world is today. We have to adapt to the framework that we've built ourselves. It's no good looking to the past and wishing things were different, or rehashing the past, or thinking, well, what they did back then succeeded, so maybe we should try doing that now. We just have to act within the framework that we have now and do the best that we can. be the best people that we can be the best examples of our race that we can be. And then people will be interested in what it is that you have and what it is that drives you. And I think people will come to our cause. Just don't be a bad person. Don't live up to the negative stereotypes that are portrayed about us. It's very easy to do that. And a lot of people get cynical and they end up doing that. And just do the opposite and be what comes naturally to you as a white man, which is to be a good man. And you can find all my work and those of my co-hosts at radioalbion.com.
Magnificent. And thank you so much for coming on, brother. You're a true champ. And we're absolutely going to have you back soon so we can address some more of your background. And of course, you're also... you and Mr. George can engage in a wonderful conversation about music, I'm sure. Mr. George, your final thoughts and where folks can find you?
Yes, Sven, it was wonderful speaking to you, and there's so much more I want to ask you and pick your brain about. So we do have to do this again soon. We opened up a lot of different interesting areas, and I think we just scratched the surface on some of them. Yeah, what you said about Indus Valley and things like that are important. I think we need to continue talking about, love. Love implies boundaries. You can be open to others and compassionate where appropriate, where there's reciprocity. But we do need to know bits of history like that as well. Not bits, it's very consequential, to understand boundaries and be able to live in this world where, as I said, there's going to be more interaction because of technology and mass communication and especially mass movement, but be able to navigate that appropriately. I was just looking up because someone was asking about this in the chat. There certainly in places like Tokyo, yes, there are enclaves of people not only from other Asian countries like China and Korea, a little further flung out like India, but yes, there is a little Europe and like French part of Tokyo. So Sven's right. Any kind of capital city, major city, special capitals are going to have students and expats and business people and artists who are from other countries. And that's okay. I think it's not, Jason talks about living in the real world. And that's what we're all here to do. As I said, navigate this and learn from each other and ask questions instead of coming in with your checklist of here's what needs to happen, like Jason was saying before. So I think it's, these are interesting things to keep in mind. I think we do ourselves a disservice if we have all this wonderful passion and feeling and righteousness about wanting to protect and love where we come from and not see it destroyed, but then are very ham-fisted in our prescriptions or, pontificate on these fantasies, like Jason was saying, instead of living in the real world. I may be wrong, but for, as far as I can see, living in the real world, the way things are going is England, France, America aren't going to become 99.9% white. I don't think that's really the goal. I think it's about, maintaining the majority of the population, certainly, but it's more about the will, the boundaries, the self-understanding, the sense of health and peoplehood again, so that we can, as I said, navigate the complexities of this high technological world that we live in, that short of a comet hitting the earth or something isn't going to go back. It's not going to go back anytime soon to just little rural villages for everybody. So that's the point I was trying to make there before. And I hope it's understood, but I'm always open to learning. As Jason said, this is a conversation, a long, long conversation that we've all been learning together and growing together over time now, which I'm very honored and humbled to be part of. Sven is right about you be your best self. You don't always have to announce things. You don't walk into the grocery store, or walk into a restaurant and immediately start talking about these kinds of things. Your character and who you are kind of leads the way. And that happens with, as we were saying, our media communication as well. So from my end, I've been a little out of the loop with things. I haven't talked about it too much, but my world's been a bit upside down for the last few months. I'm okay, but there's been definitely some things to deal with. So my music's been a little delayed. I do have a full-on production that I may revisit. I may just start putting out, just flinging stuff out there, have fun with this social media environment. Micro videos are a big thing on Instagram and elsewhere. So if you follow me anywhere, look out for that, because I might just, the fun thing for me is I think I'm just going to go through, I have tons of old songs and like little things, works in progress. I would just like sing over parts of them, put out like a little 15 or 30 minute clip, a second clip, excuse me. So just start like flinging more stuff out there, having fun with it. A lot of people are growing that way. And if you follow me there on those different social media platforms, you like it, please share it. That might well build some energy and get it out to other people. And that's certainly one of my big projects and intentions over the next few months.
Can I just
said.
say,
and my site is thegreatorder.com.
There you go.
Yeah, can I just say thank you both so much for inviting me on. I very much enjoyed this conversation. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, brother. It's totally our pleasure. We really enjoyed. You can hold a mic. Jared and I get a little nervous sometimes whether folks are able to carry the mic, they'll be able to talk, and you have no problem elucidating your thoughts, and we really appreciate that. Sven is a great host, folks. Don't miss any of his shows. And looks like we had Rory Herbert just show up saying it's his 60th birthday today. And so a big happy birthday for you, Rory. Of course, I'm dressed up for your birthday. Where have you been all day? And on that note, folks, I am going almost certainly going to be back in several hours to do a review of the debate debacle of our very own Mark Collett and Richard Spencer, which was just yesterday over there on the Kill stream. What a mess!
Could you give us the elevator explanation, the 30-second explanation of, I'm not aware yet of how that was a mess? What's the takeaway from that?
Well, they ended up, I think, going at each other rather than subject matter.
What was the debate over?
The start of the debate, I think
what were the positions? What was each side arguing?
That COVID, whereas where I came in before, but I'll start at the beginning of the debate when I review it. But they were discussing COVID, and of course, Spencer has contrary or establishment positions, and they both ended up shouting that they were each other were contrarians, and Spencer was saying that Mark is essentially Fox TV. And Spencer was saying that, Mark was saying that Spencer would still be in it if he were in the limelight and hadn't ruined his image. And so it was a mess. We'll have fun going through it.
All right.
I think there's probably not much of a friendship built back up in there. But on that note, a big happy birthday to Rory Herbert, of course. And thanks again to the one and only Sven Longshanks. Make sure you follow him, folks. Radio Albion. And we look forward to seeing you all again next time.